We are going to be recording this meeting. So, welcome to Province 4-5 Creation Care Network meeting. Today is January 13th, 2025, and we will begin with prayer. Jerry, would you like to lead us in that?
Yeah, I'd be glad to do that. I have come across in recent weeks a new favorite person, Margaret Wrinkle, who is a frequent contributor as an opinion writer to the New York Times and is a nature writer. I just wanted to share a brief meditation from her as a way of opening our time. This is Praise Song for the Praise Song of a Song Sparrow in Winter. It felt awfully appropriate in how wintry things are feeling at the moment for many of us. He came from somewhere north of here, and I did not expect him to stay. There's never been a song sparrow in this yard during our time here, but this one song sparrow has taken up residence. He sings from within the pine tree next to the driveway. He sings from the middle of the power line above the road. He sings from inside a holly bush at one end of the pollinator garden. All day long he sings and sings. It is a loud, piercing song that shudders his full body, a song that lifts straight through the clouds and far beyond the sky. All this long winter long, the song sparrow in his pine tree pulpit has been teaching me that one exuberant, unceasing song can change everything. So we do pray that the God of grace and glory, the Holy Spirit of the living God, fall upon us that we might indeed sing. Amen.
Amen. So today, thank you. Today we have with us, we have three fellows. We have Elizabeth Simpson, Ellie. Raise your hand, Ellie. She lives in Rogers Park, Chicago, and she's a member of the Episcopal Church of the Ascension. We have William K. Lewis. He lives in Cullman, Alabama. Did I say that right? And he teaches English as a second language at Wallace State Community College. But he also just told you that he was a newly graduated seminarian. And we have Lori Petrie. I hope I said your name correctly. And she lives and works and worships in Hyde Park, Chicago. All three have been fellows. I'm going to be totally honest. I don't know what a fellow is, and I don't know what fellows do. And I just know that they are eco justice fellows for the Episcopal Church. And I'm really excited to have them come and talk to us today and tell us what they do, what a fellow is, what they do, what they did, their projects, because they had to have a project, and how they can move forward and how they left those projects to move forward for the community that they built the project for. Okay, I'm going to let you three decide who's going to go first. Don't fight me. Do we say?
Well,
Okay, Lori,
I can go ahead and I'll go ahead and go first, just so we can have a nice sense of scaling up, I think, for our projects as we go. But anyway, so yes, my name's Lori Petrie. You did a great job pronouncing it. And so my home parish is St. Paul and the Redeemer in Hyde Park, Chicago. So to kind of answer your question about what an Eco Justice Fellow does is we were all learners. We're learning together. We were a cohort of people learning together from each other and also from kind of a group of mentors who mentored us on how to organize within our communities and advocate for eco-justice where we live and within our faith situation. So anyway, as a part of this fellowship, which was summer to fall of 2024, we all kind of conceived of, planned, and completed a project. My project was to create a discussion guide for and then run a series of events at my parish to kind of talk about how we, the people in my parish, wanted to be a part of ecological justice in our community. So like the biggest part of that project was figuring out how to meet the people in my parish where they were, and figuring out how to be productive in a discussion group and like what kind of the outcomes of that sort of project could be.
All right, Ellie, do we, who wants to go second?
You can go ahead.
Okay, I guess I'm going second. Hey, everybody, my name is William, but you can call me Will if you prefer. And I think Lori nailed the question, what an eco-justice fellow is, right on the head. Imagine something like a cross between an on-the-ground internship and a very intensive accelerated master's course, and you've got pretty much the good, like a good idea. I applied on a whim because a person in the Diocese of Chicago, who is not Lori or Ellie, messaged me and said, you should apply for this fellowship. And I didn't think I'd get it. And to everybody's surprise, I did get it. And I had a great time. It was a phenomenal experience. Most of the fellows came from something of an activist or organizing like background, and that was their skill set. Lori, this is probably true for you as well, but I came from more of the formal theological background. And so I had very little practice in organizing or activism at all. And so that was all very new for me. I feel like I probably learned more than most people did because I had a whole lot more to learn. And I think that the most valuable takeaway for me from the fellowship was learning, sort of building up the organizing muscles and learning how to network with people who are also passionate about eco-justice, which encompasses a whole bunch of different things, and learning how to build coalitions with people that I otherwise would not meet and otherwise might not agree with, and learn how to sort of harness our different skill sets to accomplish some real good for real people. And that was really eye-opening and invigorating for me. And let's see, my project was very local, very localized. It was centered around a public park here in Coleman County, Alabama. It's a county park, but it's functionally in downtown. It's just like a couple minutes car ride from downtown. And it's free, it's accessible to the community, and there is a whole big chunk of the park that is dedicated to songbird habitat. There are some nonprofits in the area that are creating a bird garden. That's like an official registered thing you can do in Alabama. You can have a registered bird garden. And they've been doing that, creating more bird habitats, creating very non-invasive hiking trails so that people can get away from the roads and away from the development and be surrounded by trees and listen to the birds sing. And that has a lot of really positive impacts on people's mental health because it can help counteract a lot of the negative noise from urbanism, which urban development's a good thing, but it does have some cons. And so having some spaces like that can help you get away from some of those cons and help you sort of reset and ground yourself. And so in order to kind of promote that space, my project was to create a brief ecumenical liturgy based on the Episcopal morning prayer, but certainly not exclusive to Episcopal folks. And so that was a good time. That was a lot of fun. I think probably Lori underestimates how cool her project was. Mine was much more boring and mundane and time constrained. But since then, I've been involved with some other folks in the Diocese of Alabama. The diocese has like a very loose nonprofit that is trying to increase clean water access in the Black Belt of Alabama, which is a belt of counties in the southern third of the state where most of our African American population lives, and there's lots of really chronic water access issues. So we've been distributing filters and partnering with local nonprofits there, meeting more people who are passionate about eco-justice from a variety of faith backgrounds, and it's been a lot of fun. So, Ellie?
So I'm Ellie Simpson, and like my two counterparts, we are all Eco Justice Fellows, which I loved and enjoyed. I came from kind of an organizing background, but in a very different sense. Like I had never organized anything around eco justice. I had been very involved in like political organizing, but nothing in justice organizing, I guess would be a better way to put it. And I think I applied to become a fellow also kind of on a whim, and also because I was promoting it because I work for the Diocese of California, but I live here in Chicago. I was promoting this fellowship to the young people there, saying, hey, this is a cool thing. I think this is a cool thing. You guys should apply. And then I was like, well, I should apply. I think it's a cool thing. So I applied to it and also was surprised like Will that I got it. And I was like, whoa, that's really cool. And I'm so happy that I did because I feel like I gained a lot. Eco justice was something that I was passionate about and cared about, but I didn't necessarily feel like I had the tools to affect change in my local space. And so that was what I went into, hoping that I would come out feeling like I now had the tools to go do things. So I think that's one of the most powerful things for me of being a fellow was being empowered and encouraged and uplifted and supported in doing a project that made me feel like I can do this. I can be a leader in this area in my own local context. So my project was to start an eco justice group in the Diocese of Chicago. And the group started in August of last year and has been going since then. Richard is on and is also part of that group, a very strong member. And we have been running strong since then. We passed a resolution here in our diocese in November as part of that group wrote and sponsored a resolution, which Richard did a ton of work on to encourage our diocese to work towards net zero greenhouse gas emissions. And we are now working to create resources to help our churches and parishes move in that direction. So that is the kind of forward momentum of the justice work, but the project itself was just to start just to start the group. So I did a lot of time doing phone calls. I spent a lot of phone calls to people one-on-one, a lot of coffee hour chats, a lot of meeting up with people and saying, hey, I'm looking to start this group, are you interested? There had been a group like this in our diocese like about a decade before, is my understanding, that had ceased to exist. So there are some people who are now part of the group that were part of an eco group in the diocese like a decade ago and are back. And there's also a lot of new faces in our group. And I think it's very encouraging to be able to come together, to have people who support one another, who want to support positive change, and also who are very understanding of the limits that churches have, because we're all, like most of us are either clergy in the group or lay leaders. And so we all know that we all have limited time, and we're all choosing to be involved in this and to create resources for people we also know have limited time. So that's a summary of my project and kind of the work that is happening going forward now.
So how do you tell us how to be a fellow? I mean, how would we go about doing that, and what does it entail? I guess that's um yeah. Does anybody else have a question like that or want to know what a fellow is, or if you don't already know?
I can jump in. The way to become a fellow is they open applications. The Episcopal Church like puts out a press release that says, here's how you apply. here's the application form, and you fill out that application form, and they will contact you back. And that normally comes out like maybe the beginning of the summer, end of the spring. This was the second cohort. So there was one cohort before us. So this is a new program that the Episcopal Church is running. And it is for like young adults, kind of like 20 to 30-ish. I don't remember the exact cutoff, but it's for young adults. I highly recommend it. And a lot of groups like this Province 4 and 5 Creation Care group often promote it so that people can learn about it, or other young people can learn about it. Or like I was promoting it in my diocese, or the diocese I work for.
So what are you three taking away from this? This experience. I know that you you have your projects and everything that you've done. I guess how does what are you taking away from this? Another reason why people would want to be a fellow, and how can we support this besides advertising for you? How else can we support this?
I think I'm taking away number one, like greater skills and confidence around talking about eco-justice issues, and getting people together to do stuff, organizing, you might say. But I think I'm also taking away like knowledge of how many faith-based networks there are around me that are interested in the issue of eco-justice. I think, you're a part of a church, you're a part of a denomination. Maybe you haven't even been a part of it very long. I'm a relatively recent Episcopalian. I just got confirmed like this past year.
Oh,
Um,
nice.
yeah. Yay, thank you.
Ew.
And uh so yeah, I I didn't have any idea of like who are the people to talk to, who are people that are also interested in this work, and I didn't realize how many people are. Um, and so it was really cool to learn about all that stuff and to meet people who could connect me to other people.
I'll second all that. And I've already said I'm going to take away like an increased skill set in organizing and beneficial networking. I don't mean networking in like a kind of sleazy way. But I'll add, I'll flatter myself and say I've made several friends through this. I talk to these folks on a semi-regular basis still. I made friends in the previous cohort. I've talked to them several times. And a lot of encouragement because climate news is mostly bad. And there's good reasons why that's the case. But there's also some insidious reasons why bad news is reported heavily and good news is not reported heavily. And meeting a bunch of different folks from a bunch of different backgrounds who are very different from me in a lot of ways, and yet we're all united by this passion for conserving the earth and the people who live on it and don't see those things in opposition to each other. That was very encouraging. There's a lot more good news than the headlines can make it seem. And as far as what folks can do to support us besides just advertising, assuming you've already advertised this to folks in your congregation, because if it doesn't get out, people don't apply. So once you've done that and people know about it, fight back against imposter syndrome. I think a common theme in our group this year was that none of us felt like we really belong. None of us felt like we were going to get in. We were all surprised when we did get in. And the fact of the matter is that you don't need to be an expert organizer or have advanced theological degrees or know what you're talking about to get started. And if we all wait until we know what we're talking about to get started, we won't get started. And so a way you can support people is if you know somebody who's interested in the fellowship, help them fight back against imposter syndrome. you know anybody who wants to get started doing something and feels like they're not qualified, push back against imposter syndrome, because if we all wait until we're experts to start doing something, it's not going to get done.
You are so right.
I would second everything that both William and Lori said, because it was a lot of what I would have said. I think one of the things that I'm taking away that's maybe different from the two of them is a lot more theological basis for why to care about some of these things, because I didn't have a lot of those liturgical theological resources at my disposal before. And I grew up in the church, but not in the Episcopal church. And the church I grew up in didn't have any teaching or support or theology around that or this work. And so that's one of the things that I think has been really helpful to me, is having, like, I care about this thing, but like, why should I care about it as a Christian? And I think that's really helpful when you're talking to other Christians and saying, you should care about this too. So that's one of the things that I think I'm taking away that was really helpful to me. I really like what Will said about supporting people who might be interested in this, or encouraging people even. Like, if you know a young person who's interested in this, I think all of us would highly recommend it. We all got so much out of it. The practical parts of just doing something, like being required to do a thing, is really empowering in a way, because it can be scary to get started. But if you have to get started, then it's easier to keep going, because you make those connections, you make friends, you find a group like this, which I only found this group because I became a fellow and started looking around to be like, well, what's happening in my area? Like, what's my province doing? And I would have never even really started looking if I hadn't become a fellow. So just encouraging and uplifting people that you know are interested in this and who are young, but you know, it really is beneficial, and I love my experience.
Could a college student be a fellow?
Yes.
Yeah.
100%. Some
Yeah.
people are still studying in our
Mhm.
cohort, or working towards degrees, because it happens partially in the summer. You get kind of a good break if you're a student, and then it does go into the fall. So some people were working around class schedules, and we were
Mhm.
flexible as a group to make sure that people who had class schedules and other things would still be able to join us for our meetings.
In fact, if I remember correctly, Ellie, Lori, correct me if I'm wrong, our specific fellowship was open to people 21 to 30. Does that sound about right?
Yeah, I think that's about right.
And I'm not sure how, hard and fast those minimums and maximums are, but probably kind of squishy is my impression. And so we had, I think, 3 or 4 undergraduate students.
How many
Nice.
So
fellows
yeah,
were
please.
there total?
There were 7 of us.
7. Okay.
So is there a cost involved? I mean, do you have to pay to be a fellow? Because sometimes,
No.
okay. So do you get paid?
Yes.
Okay. It's because
You won't be able to live on that. So don't give anybody the impression this is like a job, but you do get some compensation. It's still a labor of love.
so that is something, moving forward, like we have people in our congregation who are just getting into creation care, and like what you said, Ellie, just didn't even think about it before. Now they're like gung-ho. It's like, I need to do this. This is what God's calling me to do. So this was one of the things I was thinking about when we were talking about this, and finding out more information. I would just want to make sure that it wasn't going to be cost prohibitive for them, and if it was, how we as a congregation could support them. So, I mean, that's another thing that we can do as a creation care in a green team or whatever in our congregations. Is that's another thing we can do if we have a person we can help support financially. I don't know. That was just something I just was thinking of when you were speaking. So. And
I love that energy. And I think certainly if you did have someone from your congregation do this program or a similar program, you might have some funds available and offer to help fund whatever their project was. Because
Hmm.
some people's projects cost money and other people's
Hmm.
didn't. Um,
Yeah.
but I also want to say regarding the funds, so the future of this program is not like entirely certain, because it was a part of the like three main priorities of Bishop Michael Curry. Now that we have a new bishop, uh, he'll be designating his priorities. And I'm sure Creation Care will be among them, and I'm sure there will continue to be programs like this. But that's to say, we can't say that the program will work exactly the same way or be funded exactly the same way. We don't know.
right, right. Well,
Yeah.
that's good to know. And that was one of the conversations we've been talking about as well, as far as what the new PB was doing and and you're right. Right now, we don't know anything. We can just kind of guesstimate. So, but that is part of the conversation that we've been having as well. The leaders of the Province 5 Creation Care. So, yeah, I'm glad you mentioned that.
Well, it begs kind of a question then. For one, folks, so I think we're in kind of Q&A mode. So if you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand or put it into chat or use the hand raising function, which I think is like a react down there. You see that heart down there on the bottom of your Zoom screen to raise your hand. So I see a chat, in here from David Lawrence saying, hey, maybe we need a fellow in our diocese. So when you guys are talking, what I feel is a lot of gears spinning in people's heads about
Mhm.
possibilities. What's the present moment right now for application for the next cohort? Is there one open? Is it that kind of timing, or do we even know? Is there any inquiry to be made if someone is sitting there going, I know, Susie so and so might be interested in this. Is there something can be done?
And my question is why is it just for the young people? Is it because is it like because older people have already done it or are doing it? Or I mean, I don't know. You know me, I like to do everything, right? So that's my ADD speaking. But um, but no, seriously, why is it just for the youth? Anybody want to answer? You're more than welcome. Or I can just put it out there to somebody. I don't know.
I can take a
I'm not.
shot.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, go
go
ahead.
ahead. No, you're in it, so go ahead.
Okay. Um, the impression I got was that it's age specific, not because older folks are not doing anything. There were lots of people we met who were from every generation conceivable, who were doing lots of great stuff. I think it was more to focus on sort of hopefully the next generation of church leaders, lay leaders, or ordained leaders, because I think there was at least one other fellow besides me who is in the discernment process right now in the Diocese of North Carolina, and maybe one other, I can't recall. And so I think that was the focus, is specifically like future leadership and training people who don't know how to do this to do this, so that in the future we can pass those skills along. I don't think anybody was meant to be excluded. As far as the 2025 situation goes, I am looking, and I can't find anything right now, but maybe Lori or Ellie knows, or maybe we can find out and Lori or Ellie can let y'all know. I do remember that I applied in May. I
Okay.
applied for the fellowship in May of 24, and I found out early in June that I had been accepted. So there's not, the application process is not very rigorous or onerous. It's very quick, probably 20, 30 minutes. What do you think, guys? Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty easy.
Yeah.
I
So
mean,
it is, you're not like buying a house or anything like that. It's just a couple questions, give some contact information. It can very much be done on a whim. Clearly, it's what we all did.
So let me guess. So you probably heard about it through press release or somebody said to somebody and they said it to you. I'm trying to figure out what 815 is doing. So if it's coming out of there, they get an application process together, they make an announcement, they have a window, they run that window. Right now, I can imagine them sitting there going, when we find out if there's any budget left, we will send out an application. Is that possibly what's going on at the moment?
That seems probable to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that, and also like our applications opened like April, May, I think they were open for about
Mm,
2 months. And it's my understanding that that's about when they opened for the cohort before-ish.
Yeah,
Yeah.
60 days. That makes sense to me.
So it's like about one cohort a year that runs through the summer, fall. So they
Yeah.
open, late spring.
Yeah.
mhm.
We know that the mood in 815 and then like the shorthand for, the Episcopal Church Central, is to push money away from central programs at the moment. And so we shall see if this is read as that. But anyways, so I wonder if I'm looking for questions, not seeing any. Rhodey. Now I do.
Well, I was just saying that for us old folks, third act part of Bill McKibben's sort of 350 organization for elders now, and I just dropped into the chat the link to it. It's really quite active around here, and New York actually has done some pretty interesting stuff recently, holding polluters accountable for the next, I think, 20 years or but many billions of dollars.
Yeah.
We'll see how that.
And my reaction, Jeanette, is kind of, for every young person that we actually managed to get involved, there are 10 of us old folks hanging out. That it really is a necessary investment to say we need to push money toward young people because
Right.
they're the ones that are kind of absent.
Mhm.
And also you invest in a young person and you got 40 years. You invest in somebody like me and you got 5. So, that. And
Oh yeah, no, I understand. No, I get it. I was just wondering why it was just it's like because there's still some people who have, like 30 years left. You know, um
I do remember one of the things we talked about at one point being that this fellowship, the way it's set up, is for young people, but it's meant to be able to be something that you could do at multiple levels, right? Like the Episcopal Church is running this, but you could run something like a fellowship like this here at the provincial level, or you could run something like this at the diocesan level. Like it's not something you have to
Absolutely.
only do through them.
Mhm.
Like this is something that can be duplicated and run by many groups, and it could be done for different age groups.
you have any idea how much the budget line was? In other words, how much money does it cost to run this for 7 people? Because that's what I see David's kind of hinting at here. This doesn't have to be done completely centrally. A diocese might choose to do it, or a province. You're just looking in the chat here.
The budget for our fellowship was impacted by the fact that we traveled to Raleigh, North Carolina to be together in person for a weekend. And that is almost certainly where the lion's share of the expenses came in because our travel was covered. And so that would be most of the expenses. The stipend we receive would be probably more than the average parish could do for 7 people, but a province could certainly, I would think, do that for 7 people.
I think Heather would beg to differ, but okay.
Well, could in principle.
So the question is not whether it's in the province's budget now, but what size is it really, and how does it fit against things where different parishes in the province might pitch in? It's not something that you get into a budget without going through several general conventions, and we all know how hard that is. It's multiple years, but there's lots of other ways to fund things as long as you know what size you're funding and how you're going to do it. And as for so I'm going to Forma in 2 weeks, and Forma was 2 years ago was at UVA, and the travel involved a flight, right?
Mhm.
And now we've got 5 people from the diocese going in a single car. We're actually renting a minivan and driving from the Detroit area to Plymouth and then out to Waycross to be there because it's regional. So, there's different ways of approaching that. Getting people face to face is really important, but you don't have to have everyone in the country in one place. You have to have an idea of why you're getting people together and who you need in the room. And if you're doing something at a smaller scale, you don't do it the same way as if you do it across the country.
Yeah, so where I see this going conversation-wise is from this was a fellowship. There are many. There are certificate programs. The center, that's the thing I promoted at the beginning of this call is a certificate. It's a 1-year fellowship, you could say. It costs the folks some, but it probably doesn't cost them as much as it costs to put it on, since the time is all, it's that kind of model, right? That there's Wild Church Network and Seminary of the Wild and all sorts of places. So that was one of my curious questions to you guys too, is where have you seen something similar operating? And what I also hear in the room a lot is, how many ways, if we decided it was important enough, could we all get together and try to make something like that happen? Instead of waiting, and this is where we're going to have to learn, don't wait on 8:15. There's no future in waiting on 8:15.
Yeah, I
So-
think like the biggest, most important thing for making this happen, because what we all said, our primary things that we got out of it was being connected with like networks of people and like having the opportunity to like try out a project for ourselves. So like honestly, like the resources for lessons and stuff are out there. I definitely don't think you should need to pay for any sort of like curriculum or content. As long as you have like people that are willing to volunteer their time to like mentor 1 or 2 younger people for like say the length of a semester, I think you could definitely run this pretty cheaply.
I even
Yeah,
see
for sure.
Matt's comment kind of to that effect, saying like some people, like older people, can mentor younger people, which is to a certain degree what happened for us. Like we had people from
Absolutely.
the Episcopal Church who are older, who are mentoring us and helping us ask questions about our projects and be thoughtful and like walking us through on an individual level and also on a group level. And we had like people who are doing theology in this come in and speak to our group. Will said we went to visit a church and kind of learn from them about the work that they were doing in a very specific context. So having mentors and people and all of those people that came to speak with us were volunteering. Like there wasn't anything they were getting out of it. The people who came in to speak to us and talk with us and
encourage people start setting their foot down about how people just break the rules.
Yeah. So people who saw value in this and wanted to support us, and I feel very loved and cared for that people put time into supporting and uplifting us and bringing us to the point where we can do a thing and keep doing things.
There was just a comment about concern about relying on gratis volunteer work for everything, and that resonates with me a lot. Because to a certain extent, you get what you pay for. Nobody did this for money. None of us did this for money. The stipend is not sufficient to live on. But nevertheless, we need money to stay alive. And so some degree of compensation does seem to be very important. But I think if you do this at a more local, smaller scale, in your diocese or in your geographical area or your province or your state or whatever, you could convince, I think, depending on what diocese you're in, you could convince a diocese to provide a smaller budget that would still allow for a more specific, localized, smaller scale, and still like partially compensated kind of program. There's no reason that a diocese couldn't do this in principle.
I agree.
Let me
But
shift this a second.
I'm
we
all
got
for
about-
spending people's money,
I'm
though.
We got about 10 minutes.
So, well, I had a question,
Yep.
going back to your projects. How did you get people involved? What did you do? What was your target? How did you get people involved in your project? Stop fighting it.
My guess is that it was probably a little different for each of us. My first step to getting people involved was I talked with somebody at the diocese to say, hey, do you know anybody who's interested in this? If I'm doing something on the diocesan level, maybe there's other people who have done things like this before. And she gave me a bunch of phone calls from phone numbers of people that she knew were doing things in their churches, people who had done this from the group 10 years ago. And I did a lot of phone calls, and those people knew people. So it was playing the grapevine to connect with people and being willing to pick up a phone and call people.
Absolutely.
For me, Will.
I think that's true. My project was arguably the least successful of the fellowship this year, so I'm not a good person to ask about how to do it right. I could probably tell you how not to do it, but I asked around town. I live in a small town. Coleman has about 20-ish thousand people, which to me is not small, but for most of you is probably pretty small. And so a lot of people know a lot of people. You just have to ask folks you know, because there's a good chance that if you ask 10 people, one of them will know somebody. I went to my diocese as well, and I got a lot of contacts that were very helpful, not necessarily to my specific fellowship project, but to future projects and stuff that I've gotten involved with since then, been very helpful. So that's mostly how I did it.
Let's shift that. Go ahead. Nope.
My project was just within the parish, my local parish, and everybody there was very excited that a young person was doing that. As soon as they announced that I was a fellow, everybody started coming up and talking to me after church. And honestly, my biggest struggle was keeping my project, and keeping everybody else from being like, oh, your project should be this, and like, here's how you should do it.
Yeah.
Not a bad problem to have.
That's a lot of support, huh?
Yeah, I mean, it's energy at least.
It is. It
Better
is.
than being ignored.
Well, and that kind of gives you ideas on what you could do next, right? And listening to what everybody's saying, it gives you ideas of where you can move forward. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
So let's talk about projects for a second so we've actually been talking about a program called, this Eco-Justice Fellowship. Let's talk about the projects. So there's you guys's, and then there's 4 others, and then there was a whole year before that. So a bunch of projects out there. After seeing yours and everybody else's or whatever, I'm assuming you probably at least talked to each other about what you did in your cohort. What are the projects that need doing? What are the projects that work really well? We're sitting here thinking about how to create a fellowship, but we also could be sitting here thinking about what kind of stuff could we be doing? So what kind of stuff could we be doing from your experience?
I think my biggest takeaway for making the project was that, and talking to other people about their projects and what worked for them, is that the amount of time that you're in the fellowship, which is about the length of a semester of school, actually isn't that long. So it really does have to be either something really introductory, like exploring starting a program or a group. Like Ellie said, her project was just literally starting the group, and then everything else that the group does after this is outside the scope of her project, like it's extra. And my thing was kind of that too. Like, my project was creating a discussion guide and leading events talking about what my church wants to do with eco-justice in our parish, but then like all of the stuff that we do after that is outside of the scope of my project. So I think something to remember is that like foundation building type projects are really good, or like partnering with an organization that already exists to do a project with them is really good. There's not reasonably enough time to like build something from the ground up. And also that's just really hard for a young person to do anyway, who like doesn't know anything.
Down to 5 minutes. Other questions, folks? Oh, I see a hand. There's Jim. Yeah.
Yeah. So I just want to say, it seems to me like in terms of asking about the possibilities with 815, so we now have 13 fellows of people who are in their 20s and 30s who have done projects because they were financed by the national church. And right. So this is one of those things where everybody talks about wanting to support younger people in the church, but it's always a struggle, right? This is one of these struggles, right? I remember a long time ago when I was in that space, right, where this is happening. So independent of that, it seems like here's an example of where actual results can be lifted up to demonstrate why this kind of stuff should be happening. Bishop Perry at the Diocese of Michigan is a big fan of doing community organizing at the parish level, and is requiring everybody in the discernment process to undergo training in community organizing. But when we had the community organizing class back a couple of years ago, when I was there, I was the only person who was in the community organizing space. Everybody else was there because they were required to be there, but had not thought that through. But I have experienced at St. Aidan's in Ann Arbor where actually doing community organizing has actually worked. We have actually gotten, it's not a huge thing, but we have had people come into our congregation as a result of doing the community organizing in our community, and has actually increased the pledges. I wasn't sure that was actually going to happen, but it did. We got a physician who came in, and Physicians Against Gun Violence, and they actually helped our budget. The point of that is, in terms of, there's always this, great challenge of what to do about the national church, but here's an opportunity to lift up. These are the kinds of things that should be happening, and that I want to connect with folks later on, because my wife is doing her in the discernment and doing her internship at the Canterbury House at the University of Michigan. So there's some opportunity to do some thinking about how to lift up some of these things. I don't like stuff.
Yeah. Hey, David.
I'll just build on that a little bit and say, also in Ann Arbor, but I've come from New York, so I've looked at the Episcopal Church from a couple different angles over the last 10 years or so. Community organizing is misunderstood. You go on the ECUSA website and you look, there's an asset map there. It's not a real asset map in that it only has Episcopal Church assets in it, right? So if you want to do community organizing, you actually have to look outside your doors. And Episcopal Church, every Episcopal parish I've been in has a real problem looking outside their own doors, right? And where are the assets, the people and the organizations that you should be partnering with who are within blocks of you, right? So there's some really basic things about community organizing that would change the way you think about what it means to be Episcopal, right? And we don't think that way. We think about how to bring people into our pews to have them sit there rather than how do we engage. So I have a story from the Diocesan Convention this year where we presented our work for the last year and got a unanimous agreement that we should have a commission on ecological justice. And that there was two comments. Well, many people spoke for it, but there's two comments that stood out for me. One was the head of the vestry in the parish of Saline, who said that she was happy to see this, and she brought this to the vestry for discussion before the convention, and the vestry unanimously decided that they actually needed to do something in the parish and formed a green team. Now, I don't want to say whether the green team is actually, but they didn't have one, and then they did, and it's because we put something up there. But then that really impressed me that, well, we already had an impact. Something happened because we were just doing something, right? But the next thing that happened is what I want to bring to this discussion, which is a young person got up and said, actually crying. She broke up as she said this. I'm so happy to see this because this is a crisis that really has me worried and no one's doing anything about it. And at least we're doing something, right? So it's possible, if you understand how to engage the community, that you can tap into that. And that's much more important than anything we could possibly get by bringing another Episcopal into our doors. You know, we get more Episcopalians to come sit in our pews. It's not actually going to grow.
Right.
All right, we're at the top of the hour, pretty much. Thank you. Keep that weight. Anyways, anything last before we move on? Jeanette, you good? We can talk about next month.
Yes.
By the way, there's enough new for. I just dropped into Province 4 newsletter. If you have not subscribed and you want to keep up with us, this is a way to do it. Province 5 newsletter is a better way to do it, but both of them. Next month we have, I'll just throw this out real quick. Bishop Kathleen Bascom, Bishop of Kansas, who is coming. She was a sponsor of Resolution B002 this last summer in Louisville, a convention about the creation of regional creation networks. And she will be talking with us about that at next month's meeting. So I think that's a real coup for us. She's going to be I think a central bishop of influence for creation care in the Episcopal Church. So having her present with us is a big deal. So we're just putting that out. The newsletter will go out and you'll get all that as long as you're subscribing. So anyway, with that, anything else for the good of the order?
So one of the things I wanted to ask, first of all, thank you so much to Ellie and William and Lori. Lori, I know that you have to go back to work. Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us today. Greatly appreciate it. And I hope that you'll come back and join us at any time and keep us informed of the things that you're doing, especially you, Will. I know that, again, a newly graduated seminarian. I get that. So it was great hearing from you. I greatly appreciate you being here. And I think we all learned something. I did. I learned something new. One of the things that I would like to mention or ask is one of the jobs as convener is coming up with ideas and people and things that we want to talk about, subjects we want to talk about, people we would like to talk to or hear from. So I'd like for y'all to throw out in the chat what you'd like to hear, who you'd like to hear from, so that I can be in touch with people. I've asked for emails in the past, but that obviously hasn't worked. So just start putting something out there. I know one person had asked for talk about green investing.